Hey everybody, welcome back to Kratom Kingdom. This is your host Chris Irving from Knoxville, Tennessee, and I am going to try to stand up for this entire video, which is very difficult because I've only got one leg to stand on. But anyway, sitting down just seems kind of boring, and I have a lot of energy today. So today I wanted to talk to you about my personal Kratom journey. You know, where I started from and how I ended up being so obsessed with this leaf called Kratom. And I was born in 1970, which is at the tail end of the hippie era of the 60s. So my parents were straight up full on hippies. My greatest memories were living in cabins or shacks in the woods, and all of their hippie friends coming over, making a big pit fire in the side backyard or whatever, and there would be somebody with their acoustic guitar strumming, and all of us would be singing, even the kids. Singing stuff like the Eagles and Joe Cochran and just kind of, the songs of that era. And they would be passing around a doobie, of course, because that's what hippies did. And I didn't see anything wrong with it at the time. I was 10. But during that time period, I also suffered massive migraines and would literally put my head in my mom's neck and just cry because it hurts so bad. I mean, 10-year-olds shouldn't have headaches that bad. As I grew older, we moved around a lot. My dad was the grass is always greener on the other side kind of guy. So we started in Florida, moved to North Florida, moved to Georgia, then moved to California, then moved to Montana, then moved back to California, then moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, then moved back to Colorado. Lived there for a little while. That's where I made most of my pretty good friends because I was about 15 years old and I lived in a neighborhood with a bunch of other 15-year-olds. So we would experiment, the alcohol thing as much as we could. But we weren't bad kids. We would just ride our BMX bikes around. And then as I got older, I was still suffering those migraines. And I mean, they ruined my life. I couldn't do anything without knowing I was gonna have a headache by 3 o'clock that afternoon. And usually I did. I would sit through school throwing up, pale because and sweating because of these migraines. Finally, they did all the tests, tested my eyes, tested my brain. Nothing was wrong. Fast forward into my 20s, and I moved back to South Florida, where I joined a group of kids in the hardcore scene because I was a skater punk. And I met a bunch of kids in the hardcore scene, and we formed a band. I played bass guitar, because of a family of or a member of a family of hippies is going to play some instrument, and I was always drawn to the bass guitar. Geezer Butler from Black Sabbath, hero. Cliff Burton from Metallica, hero. They all played with the fingers, and they all played in that old, big time fat um, Fender precision bass style with their fingers and usually in the pentatonic scales. And it was just, that was how I learned how to play. And it turned out, and I took it very seriously, studied it for 14 years until I was in my 20s and ended up in a hardcore band. But I was a long haired metalhead kid, who listened to Slayer and Metallica and all those hard metal bands. And they wanted me to cut my hair, shave my head, and be in this hardcore thing. I was like, hardcore is 3 chords, man. That's not real music. And they just scream. They don't sing. And finally, they convinced me to sit in on a practice. And I sat in on a practice and I played bass my style to their hardcore music. And I made it a little bit more intricate. but I had so much raw emotion because I was so angry at the world. I hated the world because of my migraines. We were poor. I had nothing growing up, and I was a punk rock kid, so I wanted to rebel against everything. I rebelled against my hippie parents and became straight edge. And I hung out with these kids who, our group was about 150 to 200 kids in the South Florida area. I say kids, but we were in their 20s, who were in bands, who did no drugs, no alcohol, no immoral or illicit sex, no immoral sex. I mean, if we were having sex, it was with a committed relationship or married. And we wouldn't cheat on each other's, we wouldn't sleep with any of our homeboys' girls because that was just not straight edge. And because of that, the clubs used to invite us to be the bouncers of the club because we were all pretty adept at fighting. We were pretty big guys. I mean, we trained in the martial arts and we were straight edge. We wanted to protect those that were too drunk to protect themselves. We'd go to a house party and there would always be those jocks that took the drunk girl, into a bedroom and raped her. Or so have a couple of straight edge guys at your party, and that's not going to happen. Many times we've kicked in a bedroom door, pulled 6 or 7 jocks off of a 14-year-old cheerleader who was just too drunk to know what she was doing, ripped them outside, and beat them until they couldn't walk anymore, humiliate them, take their keys, throw them in the drain so they couldn't drive home drunk. And they quit. They got through high school. They quit bragging about who they did and how they did it and how much alcohol they drank, and so then all of a sudden all these normie kids wanted to hang out with the straight edge guys because we were getting more and more popular. I mean, they started showing up at our band, at our shows, and eventually it grew, and I grew, and I got into my 30s and joined a really, really good band that had a whole lot of potential. But I was still getting migraines. But the only thing that stopped my migraines at the time was playing on stage. I could have the worst migraine going into it. As soon as I stepped on stage and plugged in my amp, migraine gone. I would play, and all my emotional content would go into it. People could see it in my face. I mean, I was just into it. And my wife gave me a choice. She said, it's either me or the band. I'm moving out of Gainesville, where this band was started and where it was huge. Tom Petty was from there. And it was just a really great college music scene, and we were really popular. I couldn't go anywhere without somebody saying, "Hey, aren't you Chris from that band Red Roses?" Like, yeah, and he's like, "It was really cool hanging out with you last night, man." Well, that's cool, but excuse me, but there was like 500 kids there last night, and I don't remember your name. And I'm really sorry, dude. I mean, I really appreciate you coming out and watching us. What's your name? George? Okay, George. Well, hit me up the next time you're at a show and say, hey, and I'll bring you on stage, or whatever. You can stand backstage behind my amp where my wife usually stood and kind of be a VIP, just because I don't remember seeing you last night, man, because there was just too much going on. And they would, and we became known as the nice band, even though we were hard as hell. There would rarely be a show that we would play where we wouldn't get physically violent with somebody, because you all know what a mosh pit is. Well, our band would set up in the middle of the dance floor, in the middle of that pit. So when we were playing, we are getting beat, punched, pushed. So us being the tough guy, hardcore kids that we would do jumping, spinning kicks, and kind of like clear our way, so we had room to play. And me and the singer had this really special relationship, and we always were right next to each other and we play. He would get knocked down, I would pick him up and then get back to playing again. I would get knocked down, he would pick me up. I mean, we were just brothers, and I loved Kyle with all my heart. Um, then after she gave me that choice, I made the wrong decision and chose her. Never choose a woman who makes you make a choice between your life, your family, or her. She's not worth it. If she doesn't love you enough to stick with you through your career, I mean, I could have been some of the other bands that were with us, made it really big. Saves the Day, Blink 182. I mean, these guys all got huge, and we were on that path. We were signed to Sony Records. Um, Kind of an interesting story. We were on a independent label named Eulogy Records, but Eulogy, because of bands like us, got so big that Sony bought them out and MGM bought them out. So we were on major label now, and they're trying to tell us how to dress, how to, wear all black, like basically wear a uniform. And we were like, we do what we do. So we dressed the same on the street that we would on stage: camo pants, camo shorts, and a black t-shirt usually. And so then moved 10 years after we left Gainesville and left my band, and I ended up in Asheville, North Carolina, which is the home of holistic medicine and new age religion. And I met these people, that were opiate addicts and basically people that were in constant pain, who turned to heroin for the pain relief, who turned to narcotics. And then this one shaman guy in the group, he was I don't know what, he was a Native American, and his job was to go out and find medicines that were natural, that could get rid of pain, get rid of depression, get rid of anxiety. So this guy Carl Coleman in Asheville, he lived on the top of a mountain with his really cool girlfriend, and he introduced me to Kratom tea because I was crying in my room. I mean, with the migraine, and he came over to visit. It's like, dude, what's up? I'm like, I can't stand this pain anymore. I was on tramadol, I was on hydrocodones, and still the pain. He's like, well, drink a sip of this, and he gave me a cup of Kratom, and from that point on, I was like, his headache instantly melted away, and I was like, what the hell is this stuff? And he's like, it's a leaf from Indonesia. It's been in Southeast Asia for thousands of years, and these guys have been using it to work in the fields because it gives them more stamina, a better mindset, and it controls their pain, because they're doing a hard labor. When they get done, they're sore. So they chew the kratom leaves, and no more pain, happy attitude. It worked. So then I imported it to the US through people like Carl. He would buy kilos of it from a farmer in Indonesia in big boxes and then sell it to us. His, I mean, I would call myself his patient, even though he was kind of a cult leader, being the shaman and of a new age society. So I was like, hell yeah. I was like, is it legal? He's like, totally legal. And then the FDA got a hold of it because it was so popular that prescription drug companies were getting nervous because they're like, well, now there's this legal leaf going around, or this legal substance going around that's getting rid of pain, anxiety. So this could hurt our bottom line. So they tried to put an end to it. So they went to senators and congressmen and tried to make it illegal. And they were successful to a point. But after time went on, they legalized marijuana. And then Kratom got legalized in almost all 50 states, except for certain ones. Like Alabama is a no-go. For some reason, Alabama is in the past still anyway. So, and fortunately, Tennessee, as long as you were 21, it was legal to purchase, to possess, to use. And I was 21, and I had this massive stroke at 33 years old for no reason. I mean, you got to remember, I was straight edge, a mountain biker, a hiker, happily married. I was a school teacher. I was a college student. I mean, I was in the prime. I thought I was in the prime health and prime of my life. I was making adult money finally. I wasn't a kid anymore. I wasn't just a college kid, and wasn't living with my parents. We bought our first house, and I was working 50 to 60 hours a week in the middle school that I was teaching at. I was teaching computer science. Didn't have a degree yet, but because I was so good on computers, because I was obsessed with them since I grew up, that they they hired me to be a computer manager of this room full of 60 computers, and I would teach all the teachers how to use computers. And then it turned out I taught all the students, sixth, seventh, and eighth graders, how to use the computer to do certain things. Like there was a computer test that in order to get into high school, you had to pass this certain criteria in computer. And when I started, I had a 99% success rate. So 99% of my eighth graders made it easily into high school with that computer test. And they still email me today and were like, "Thank you, Mr. Irving." And I'm like, "Well, I'm retired now, so you can call me Chris." And then I went to a and then I was getting my master's degrees. And I got one master's degree in psychology while still teaching 50 hours a week. I was going to school another 35, 40 hours a week and then studying on the weekends. I just didn't give myself a break. My wife constantly wanted me to go mountain biking and hiking, and it was just too much for my brain to handle. I had a stroke. My blood pressure was probably up. I mean, I was drinking diet Monster Energy drinks, root beers, diet Mountain Dews just to survive, and pots of coffee. So I probably blew my brain up with just. I remember sitting in class one night looking at my hands going, man, these hands can do anything. I was a carpenter, I was a computer teacher, I was a laborer. I did all kinds of careers, which gave me muscles and made me the person I am today. I was a musician, so my hands were very important. I was like, what would happen if I lost one of my hands? And then I swear to God, 2 days later, Sunday, December 21st, I stood up from the couch and something was wrong. I was talking gibberish. I couldn't stand up straight. My wife thought I was on drugs or something, knowing that I had been straight edge for so many years and I would never touch that stuff. I didn't even eat meat, so it wasn't my cholesterol. Um, and back and forth, I'm like, oh, just let me go to sleep. I'll sleep it off and be okay. Because as a poor kid, we never went to the hospital for shit. I broke bones and didn't go to the hospital skating. We bandage or ace bandage it up and wait until it healed. And that's the way my life was. So I didn't want to go to the hospital with this neurological issue. I didn't even know what a neurological issue was. And I get in an ambulance and they're like, Chris, you're having a massive CVA. I'm like, what the hell's a CVA? And like, well, in layman's terms, it's called a stroke. It's like a stroke. That's for old people. And they're also for people that do drugs, push themselves too hard. And I was like, well, I don't do drugs. And they looked at me. They looked at my tattoos, my entire body covered in tattoos, and they were like, come on, Chris, be honest with us. We're not going to arrest you for doing drugs. We're going to test you anyway. And I was like, fine, test the shit out of me because I do not touch illegal drugs. I have no use to. And I wasn't drinking Kratom yet, full time. So I got to the ER. The ER thought the same thing. They wasted time testing my blood for drugs. Found nothing. Totally clean drug test. Went to court with that, because if they had just given me one pill or one shot called TPA to blast the clot out of my brain, it was such a huge clot that they didn't even think it was a clot. They didn't know what the hell it was. It was this huge abnormality in my brain. which turned out to be a massive blood clot, which sat there. So they gave me a Tylenol. They're like, man, no, this is just one of your migraines causing you to act silly and screwing you up neurologically. And I'm like, no, man, this is not a migraine. This is something worse. So they gave me so much morphine, they put me in a coma. And when I woke up from the coma, I opened my eyes about a week later, and they were like, "Oh, okay, I was in the ICU for a month." So they sat me up, put a mirror in front of me, stood me up with three people holding me up, and said, "What do you see?" And I swear I only saw half of myself, only half of a body. There was nothing on my left side. It was just erased, like somebody took an eraser and erased me. And I couldn't move it, couldn't feel it, couldn't use it. And they're like, unfortunately, Chris, you had a massive stroke. And I'm like, well, why didn't you give me the TPA? Because we had to make sure you were having a stroke. And I was like, well, wouldn't an MRI have stopped that? And they're like, well, we didn't have an MRI. It was such a small town. They didn't have an MRI in the hospital. It was across the street at another business, but it was Sunday night, so they were closed. So my poor dumbass just had to deal with it. And the clot got bigger and bigger and blocked more and more blood, causing me a massive stroke that did extensive damage to my personality, my cognition, my psychiatric and mental health. I mean, it caused me so many problems. I lost every friend I had, lost every family member I had. So I'm kind of alone in the world right now. Kratom Kingdom is my only family, and I love you guys all very much for it. Fast forward, I started getting what's called spasticity, which is where your muscles, when they're not being, when your brain's not talking to them, they just flex and flex. So my left arm ended up like this. My fist, my hand is always in a fist, always. And my foot is always on its side because it won't go lay flat because the tendons are spastic and they're pulling my foot over. So I walk on the side of my foot, which is very painful. And I went through all the rehab I could go through for like 3 years, and my stroke was just too much damage done. There was nothing more they could do. I was strong on my right side, so it was beating all my goals. I could, they would say, okay, you have to lift 110 pounds 3 times. Well, I could do that with my right arm easily. So they would say, okay, check. Um, so their goals got lower and lower because I was beating them all. I mean, I was just so determined and had such a strong right side that the pain was becoming immense. And so they kept giving me morphine and they kept giving me painkillers until I went home. After 3 months in rehab, inpatient rehab, I went home and had no more pain relievers, but my muscles I was like cerebral palsy, I mean, or MS, and I was just, everything became totally painful and useless. And I had to learn how to live with one arm and one leg, and I do pretty good. Um, but the pain and depression was too much for me to bear. So I remembered Kratom, and I went back on Kratom, and I obsessed over it. I drank so much of it that my aches and pains went away, my depression went away, and that was my journey. I mean, I thank God I knew what Kratom was before my stroke, and Carl was still in my life, so he was selling it to me a little at a time. And then I found I could go directly to the Indonesian farmers I met on Facebook. When I made Kratom Kingdom, they saw Kratom, so they tried to sell. They thought I was going to be a big distributor, like Amazing Botanicals or Mountain Kratom or something, which I wasn't. I was just a user. And they tried to offer me huge amounts of it for a couple $100. And I was like, well, I'll promote your farm on my YouTube channel if you give me a really good price. So they would sell me 3 kilos for 200 pounds, $200. and that would get me through a month. So I went, I was on disability, so I was on a very, very fixed income. Then my wife divorced me, and I had to move out. I had no place to go, so my rent was too high, and I had to pay all the other utilities, my cell phone, my insurance. Now you know my entire life story, and but Kratom helped me so much. I could drive again. I could go out in public. I had no more. My social anxiety was okay. Made a couple of friends here and there. Lost a couple of friends here and there because of my bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, all the stuff that happened from having massive brain damage. Kratom helped a whole lot of it, but it didn't help at all. And psychiatrists were useless. I mean, they did what they could, but they were treating symptoms, not. I mean, there's no way to heal the brain. So Kratom became my. I was drinking Kratom 24 hours a day when I lived. I lived in a government-owned housing. I paid very little rent to where I could afford all that Kratom, and I was drinking 4 kilos a month, which is a lot. That's like 3 pounds. Just one cup after the other, huge dosages, and literally I was out of it. I mean, I had signed out. I mean, it was like I was taking Valium or something, and not a whole lot mattered. I let a lot of bad things happen to me because I was not in my right mind. I mean, I was almost schizophrenic, being alone so much. I mean, I lived alone in this one bedroom loft, in this one loft with just one room with a kitchen and a bathroom. And it was really good for me, except for there was a lot of sketchy people in the parking lot because they knew that the old people that lived there would sell them their drugs because they needed money more than they needed the painkillers. So we had a lot of drug addicts in the parking lot, and they spotted me, this tattooed disabled guy with a car. And hey, man, can you give me a ride somewhere? Me being me, yeah, sure, of course. 'Cause I was so lonely, I would be friends with anybody. And then this is a half hour long. I'm sorry, you guys. Anyway, it led me to moving back to my parents' house once my father died because a bunch of bad stuff happened at the apartment, and now I'm starting over again. And my half of my family does not want me alive. Even they don't want me in their life. They want to cut me out like a bad appendix and throw me away. So they said when our mom dies, you are homeless. You are on the streets. So I'm kind of in a state of crisis now. And guess what's helping me? Yep, Kratom. And Kratom Kingdom, this YouTube channel. You guys and your awesome comments and your family. I mean, my memory is horrible, so I can't go through all. But there's so many of you that I've known for since I started the channel. Call you guys Kratomites, and you're the Kratom Kingdom Kratomites, and you know who you are. Um, I wish I knew all of your names because I consider you guys friends. And well, I'm gonna fall, so I'm gonna let it go for here. If you have any questions about how else Kratom changed my life, just hit me in the comments, and I'll do my best to get to it and comment. But that was my personal journey on Kratom and how I got started on it. I hope you guys. I'd like to hear your stories. How you got into Kratom. And did it save your life like it saved my life? I mean, I'm alive today because of Kratom. All right, I love y'all. Peace out.